Started. Deneen Diamond here from the Center of Excellence for Health. Super excited to be here today to present our second session for Wildlife Wednesdays. Just a reminder that one Wednesday a month, we will be providing a free class with one of our experts here in the province. Today, we have a very special guest, Marc, who is going to be introduced by our host class. And the host class today is FHS. So FHS is here as a host class, meaning that they're going to introduce Marc, and they're really excited to be here. I do want to just remind everybody that this is an initiative with the partnership of the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Tourism and the Department of Education. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Els, and Mr. Els has a wonderful student who he's going to introduce, and we will hand it over to the presenter. So without further ado, Mr. Els.
Thanks, Deneen. I actually have 15 wonderful students here, and one of them is going to give the welcome. Okay, sorry about the camera issue here, but I'm going to pass it over to Tate. Tate, take it away.
Marc Robichaud has been a forest ranger for almost 33 years and is currently the district supervisor for the Sussex-Hampton district. Originally from the Robichaud area, Marc graduated from M.F. Richard High School and went on to successfully acquire a forest technician diploma from Bathurst MBCC. Marc is married with 2 grown children and currently living in the Hampton area.
Thank you, Tate. Can everybody see my screen?
No, we just see you, Marc.
You just see me. Okay, let me try this again here. Share. How was that? Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so what I like to talk to you about is our natural wealth in New Brunswick. We're pretty lucky in New Brunswick. We have approximately 30,000 different living species in New Brunswick. So if you were to count all the living things, the species that we have, it's a little bit over 30,000. For example, we've got 35 different species of trees. We have only one species of bear, the black bear. But if you count all those species, it amounts to about 30,000. Just for an example, also, our spiders. We have about 470 different species of spiders in New Brunswick. So we don't have the black widow spider or the tarantula because they live further south. We have other species. So about 470 different kinds. I'll talk a little bit about minerals. We do have deposits of minerals in New Brunswick. In the northern part, we have zinc, copper, and lead deposits around the Bathurst area. And in around the Minto area, we have coal deposit. In Sussex, we have natural gas deposits and potash. So right now, currently in New Brunswick, there's only salt being extracted from the ground in the Penobscot area and gypsum in the Upham area. So those are the only mines that are being exploited right now. Anything else that we have is not being exploited. So those are the only 2 mines in New Brunswick currently used. So the salt is used for our roads, the highways and byways of New Brunswick, and the gypsum is used for sheetrock. So all the sheetrocks that are made for houses, they're made in St. John. So that's where the minerals are used right now. So here you see a picture of minerals that you might find in New Brunswick, the lead, zinc, and silver deposits around Bathurst. Caribou Mines was opened a few years ago, but they've subsequently closed. Not because there's no minerals there, it's because of other issues that they have, the company has. And potash also, there's a big deposit of potash in the Penobscot, Sussex area, and not currently being used right now. So all the potash that we see in the world is comes out of in Canada, out of Saskatchewan. So that's where the potash comes from right now. And potash is used for fertilizer. Just in passing though, the minerals that we have, we consider those non-renewable, which means that once it's taken out of the ground, it's not renewable. It's gone forever. Whatever we use, it will be gone. But in the forestry side, trees, animals, we consider those renewable resources. So as forest rangers, the big job that we do is we data collect. We go out in the field and we collect data, whether it's on trees or animals, because the Department of Natural Resources have different branches. We have the Fish and Wildlife branch, Crown Lands branch, and the Forest Management branch. They make decisions for the public good, but they need data. So we're the ones in the field that collect the data for them, and they are able to make educated decisions on certain things that need to be done, because there's a lot of demand for resources in New Brunswick, whether it's mines or trees or hunting, animals for hunting or something like that. So we try and collect the data so that people can make decisions. So here we see pictures of a ranger measuring trees. So trees grow and live for a period of time, just like animals do. So depending on the species of trees, they live for a period of time. A balsam fir, a Christmas tree, can live up to about 70, 80 years old. If it's an oak tree or a hemlock tree, they grow to be about 300 years. So depending on the stand of trees, people make decisions on when to use them. So if it's a good quality tree, they're brought to the sawmills and they make lumber with them. And imagine everything that's built out of wood in your house. So it's a natural resources that we have plenty in New Brunswick. So we try and want to use them when we can. Um, the forestry field is the #1 industry in the province. So they create more jobs than anything else that we have. So it's a very important industry. So as you can see here, there's a lot of items that are made out of wood, whether it's a table or floor. Um, it could be stairs as well. So those are material that's used from good quality wood. The lesser quality trees are brought to the pulp mills, and we have 2 in St. John, and imagine all the paper that's being used, cardboard. So those are all made from the pulp and paper mills. There's some farmers, basically, or mostly, that have Christmas trees. They have Christmas tree plantations, and it takes about 10 to 12 years for a Christmas tree to become nice and well formed, and they're ready for sale. So imagine a farmer that has milking cows and he wants to have an extra revenue around Christmas time. He can grow Christmas trees and sell them in December before Christmas and make a little bit of extra money. So imagine, $25 for each tree, and he has 100 or 1,000 trees that he can sell. So that's an extra revenue for him. There's other people that produce maple syrup. So what they do is either on private property or Crown land. Crown land is what I call public lands, I guess, in New Brunswick. And they tap maple sugar trees, and from the taps, the sap flows through and is collected, and the sap is boiled into maple syrup. So New Brunswick is the 5th largest exporter or maker of maple syrup in the world. So Quebec is number one, and then there's three states in the United States, Vermont, New York, and Maine, that are higher than us, and we're number 5. So in New Brunswick, I just kind of looked quickly, and it's over 500,000 gallons of maple syrup that's produced. And so if you imagine that 40 liters of sap to make 1 liter of maple syrup, that's a lot of sap that's boiled into the production. So New Brunswick is quite important in the world stage of maple syrup production. And that's mostly done out of the Edmundston area, Saint-Quentin area is where the bulk of all the maple sugar trees are located, is in those areas there. So I want to talk a little bit about enemies. We do have enemies in the forest, and the big one is forest fires. So last year we had about 200 forest fires in the province, and for the most part they were small. And so the rangers or government is to extinguish all fires in the province. It doesn't matter if it's a field, a grass that's burning, or actual trees that are burning. We will go and put the fires out, because we think that every forest is worth saving because of the loss of habitat that animals would not have. So the government is responsible for extinguishing all fires. So different equipment that we use to fight forest fires are, of course, air tankers or airplanes that drop long-term fire retardant. And we also sometimes hire people like contractors that have dozers to make wood roads for us in case we don't have access to our forests where the fires are. So we might build roads to try and help us out. So you're probably wondering what the chemical is on that long term. It's a liquid fertilizer with potash and clay. So when the airplane drops that long term, it sticks to the trees and the fire doesn't burn on the tree. So I'll just show you a video here, if you can see the video, of the technique of water bombers. So imagine the smoke is going towards a village over there. So we wouldn't leave that fire alone. We would have to put it out because eventually it would grow into a big fire. So imagine, the fires that happen in Fort McMurray with all those houses that burnt down. We certainly don't want that here in New Brunswick. So, but it's very expensive to use airplanes. It costs about $3,500 per drop to do that. So we don't use it all the time, but at times, if there's homes close by, or there's, the weather's not really good, it's very dangerous, we will use the water bombers. We have 6 in the province, and they're stationed in Fredericton. And all we need to do is, if we think that we need them, we call them, and within 20 minutes or so, they're at the fire, ready for work. So that's how basically it's done. So once the fire is safe to go on the ground, we'll actually go with hand tools, with pumps, and we'll put every smoke out. We don't leave any smoke going on, like everything is out. And you might think that it's all about boys, that boys do this, but we have quite a few girls that are forest rangers, and they do the same work as everybody else. So it's not 50-50, but every office, we have 11 offices in the province, and every office has girls working as forest rangers. So it's not limited to boys that do this. Another enemy that we have are insects and diseases. This one is the spruce budworm, and it's about 2 centimeters long. And what it likes to do is eat needles from the balsam fir. So imagine, there's thousands and thousands of these caterpillars on one tree, and within a matter of a few weeks or so, all the needles are gone and the trees die. So it's a natural occurrence. The last infestation of the spruce budworm was in the mid 1970s or so about 50 years ago, and they're coming back. So right now they're progressing from Gaspé, from Quebec, and they're coming in through Campbellton area, Bathurst, and eventually we'll see them down in the southern part of the province as well. So it's a natural occurrence, and we'll eventually see them. Something else too that I'd like to acknowledge is people that have exotic animals that don't want to take care of them anymore. They put them out in nature, and it kind of causes problems with the ecosystems, the natural ecosystems of the province. So for example, like goldfish, um, we see goldfish in ponds and brooks, and those are not indigenous to the province. And what happens is that they change the ecosystem. So if you don't want to take care of these animals anymore, give them to somebody that will love them and take care of them and not put them in nature. So it's more than just fish. It could be tortoises or opossums, or anything exotic. If it doesn't belong, or it's not indigenous to the province, we don't want them in nature because it causes problems. We do have a few natural areas in the province, areas that are protected, that there's no harvesting of trees or no mining that occurs in the province. So think of the national parks that we have. We have 2 in the province, Fundy National Park and Couche-Bougouac National Park. So those are protected areas that people cannot cut trees in them or do mining or anything like that. Provincial parks, we have a few, like Carleton Provincial Park, Mactaquac also is a provincial park, but we have also protected natural areas. So if you look at this map here of New Brunswick, we have the Canaan Bog, which is just northwest of Moncton. So that's an area that's protected. And if you look down further southwest, there's Spandic Lake. Up north, we have the Mount Carleton Extension, P&A also. That's another area on top of the provincial park that's protected. And there's another big area up north here. It's the Jacket River Gorge, P&A. So there's quite a few. If you're interested in looking at those or how many we have, you can Google protected natural areas New Brunswick, and there's a whole list of them for the province, just in case you're interested. And by the way, if you look at the shaded pink area that you see on the map, those are what we call Crown land. So public lands in New Brunswick, it's about 50-50 between public lands and private land. So we're quite, for an eastern province, it's pretty big, the amount of area that we have for public. In Nova Scotia, it's about 90% private and 10% public. In PEI, there's hardly any public lands. So we're pretty lucky. And as you go out west, the public lands are even higher. So, but in New Brunswick, it's about 50-50. New Brunswick is famous for its rivers and lakes. This one here is the St. Croix River, and it's quite famous because it was the first white settlement in North America, I guess, or in Canada. Samuel de Champlain came in 1604, I believe, and settled on an island. So it's pretty famous also because it's the border between Maine and New Brunswick. But think of all the rivers that we have, like the Miramichi, the Restigouche, Nipisiguit, St. John, Kennebecases. So all these rivers are pretty important to the province. Something else too that we have are salt marshes. This one here is in the Musquash area, but if you look through on the eastern side of the province, on the Northumberland Strait, Cushbugwac National Park, going up the Miramichi through the Acadian Peninsula, there's quite a few of these marshes around. And even though there's no trees or no visible really mammals there, it's really important that we save those ecosystems because they're all interlaced together. They're very important. They have insects and birds and all kinds of wildlife. So I'll show you, if we have time a little bit later on my presentation, the reason why it's so important to save those. Because we have an endangered species that live in this marsh or this type of marsh or ecosystem that if it didn't have it, it wouldn't be able to survive. Let's look at wildlife. Sure that you're all interested in wildlife. So we only have one species of bear in the province. It's the black bear. We don't have the polar bear or the grizzly bear. And right now, the bears are getting ready to go into their den for the winter. And by February or so, the end of February, the sow, the mother bear, will have its cub. And typically there's one or two, sometimes there's 3 cubs that are born. And when they're born, they only weigh about half a pound. About the size of a rat is how big they are. And when they leave the den in late April or so, they weigh about 35 pounds. So the mother bear, when she has her cubs in February, say she had her cubs in February of 2022, she'll keep the cubs until June of 2023. So about a year and a half, she'll keep them. And after that point of time, she'll want to start a new family. So she's looking for another boyfriend, I guess, in June so that she can start a new family. So she'll push off her cubs. They'll be old enough to take care of themselves. But sometimes they get into trouble. So I'll show you a little bit later what happens to those young bears. We also have quite a few deer. We have a big population of deer in the southern part of the province, around St. John, Quispamsis, Hampton area, and Fredericton also have quite a bit of population. So we receive calls from people that are concerned with fawns that are born near their house and they're alone. Like the mother is not there. So they think that the mother has abandoned the fawn. And that's not really what really took place, is that when the fawns are born, they're born with no scent. So the only way that they can survive or avoid the predators is to lay down and be still. And the mother only goes to give them milk once or twice a day for about 15 minutes each time until they get strong enough and old enough that they can keep up with their mother and they can run away from their predators. So before that, the fawns are by themselves. And sometimes the mother will come in and say, okay, well, it's time to move. So she'll move the fawn somewhere else, and then it'll stay there for another day or so. So don't be concerned if you see a fawn next to your house. It's probably okay. The mother's not too far away. So they're typically born in late July, but I've seen them as late as October that they're born. So the gestation period is about 200 days or so. So that's one of the data that we collect through the whole year is we collect deer that are hit by cars, and we collect the data so that we're able to determine how healthy the population is. For the moose, there's moose population in every province and territory except Prince Edward Island. So there's no moose, no deer, no bear on Prince Edward Island. Moose population, it's not unique to Canada. There's moose in the United States, and there's even moose in Sweden, Norway, and Finland. So it's not unique to us. There's some elsewhere in the world. Here's a species of duck that we have. It's the wood duck. It's the only species that actually nests in a hole of a tree. All the other species have their nest on the ground close to the water, but the wood duck has a nest in a tree. Two species of fur bearers. On the left is the mink, and on the right is the bobcat. We have two species of wildcats in the province, the bobcat and the lynx. Now, we don't have cougars. I know we get a lot of calls that people have seen cougars, but in my entire career of 33 years, nobody has ever brought in a cougar that they've mistakenly caught. And that's for across the province. The last cougar that was caught in New Brunswick was in the 1930s, 1938, I believe. So that decade in history was pretty bad because we've lost the cougar, the wolves, and the caribou. We used to have those three species in New Brunswick, and they all disappeared in that same decade. And the same decade also, moose population went really down. So they stopped hunting moose from the 1930s right up until 1960. So basically the laws at that time didn't reflect what needed to be done in nature. So that's why my job, I feel my job is more important now because we collect the data to prevent that from happening. We don't want that. We have the coyote here in the province. It appeared naturally. It immigrated the natural way through the States into New Brunswick. And it's a pretty smart animal. It's smarter than a fox, actually. And we'll always have them. And they're different sizes and different colors. So it's not a typical color like you see there. You might see a coyote that's completely black or as red as a fox and much bigger also. So they kind of mated with the timber wolf, which made the genetics a little bit different than an atypical coyote. So it's a thing that happened naturally, and they'll always be here. New Brunswick is famous for its rivers, like I said. So here's the Atlantic salmon. So you see the difference between the male and the female. The male is on the bottom with a hook bill, and the female has a prettier face. So rivers that are world renowned for salmon is the Miramichi and Restigouche, Nipissiguit have quite a bit of a population of salmon in them. Here's the brook trout. So I'm sure that maybe people go out and fish for trout. So basically all rivers and a lot of lakes have trout in them. Here we have conservation officers. So in the late 1990s, when I started my career, I used to do everything. I used to do enforcement, forest fires, worked on Crown lands, and do different things. But in 1999 to 2000, there was a split. So there's some rangers that became strictly enforcement officers, or we call them conservation officers, and another group stayed as forest rangers. So these conservation officers are basically the enforcement arm of our department. So we have different laws that we take care of: the Fish and Wildlife Act, Forest Fires Act, the Crown Lands and Forest Act, the Migratory Bird Conventions Act. So all these acts have to be enforced. Conservation officers do that for us. So by the way, the dog's name is JR. So he's the only dog that we have in the province. So he can look for items that are hidden in the forest, or he can look for lost hunters or lost people as well. So he's pretty smart. So as you can see, the conservation officers check for hunting licenses, make sure that everything's right. And there too, we have women that are conservation officers as well. So it's not limited to boys. And just a few species of birds that I want to talk about. The bald eagle is quite common in the province now. We see them quite often around rivers. In the 1970s or so, there was only 12 pairs of bald eagles in the province, which was not a lot. So now there's well over 200 pairs, and they're quite susceptible to lead poisoning. So if they mistakenly eat just a lead pellet or something like that, they don't do well. They eventually they die of lead poisoning, and it just takes one pellet. So for ducks eat little rocks to digest their food. So they need that in their gizzard to kind of mash things up, and it's easier for them to digest. So for ducks, it takes about 4 pellets for them to die of lead poisoning, but for bald eagle, it's only 1 pellet. So, I've seen probably about 4 or 5 of these bald eagles dying of lead poisoning in the last 5 years or so in this area here. So just of note, I guess. Here we have the black-capped chickadee, and what's important about the black-capped chickadee is our provincial bird. So it stays here year-round, and that's the reason why we picked it. Here we have our provincial plant. It's the fiddlehead, right? So it's in the springtime around early June or so. People go in and around the river's edge, and they collect those fiddleheads, and they boil them and eat them. So, like, to me, there's nothing like mashed potatoes with a trout and fiddleheads. It's a really good meal. Purple violet is our provincial flower. So you might see that around the province.
Mark, I'm just going to interrupt real quickly. We're at about
Okay.
33 minutes, and I'm not
Okay.
sure how much time the students have, but it'd be lovely to get
Okay.
some questions. I know that you're into the nuisance of wildlife, and it's been a very interesting presentation, but I
Sure.
would love to maybe open up the floor to some questions if that's possible.
Sure, yes. I'm going to take this out here. See if I can. All right. I've got your screen now. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, a lot of
Okay.
information that was shared by Mark, and I know being in person would be very different than being in the screen, but we do love that all the students are here, and just wanted to open up the floor to any students that had questions. I know we talked about careers, we talked about some of the species in the province. Wondering if anybody has specific questions about maybe a career that they're thinking about within New Brunswick Wildlife, or just any question at all for Mark. And I'll start us off. I don't see any hands going up, but I'm always full of questions. Marc, can you tell us a little bit about how you started your career and where you started? I know we heard a little bit in your bio, but wondering what was your passion and why you got interested in working where you do.
Growing up, we were always outside playing around. And as I was growing up, also, my father was an avid hunter. And I took the firearm safety course at 14 because my father said that I should, and I'm glad that I did. So as we were young growing up, my brother and I, we hunted with my father and we went fishing, and I was kind of like always into like nature and trees. And mind you, you look at trees, but you go to college and you actually learn all the trees. And then all of a sudden you're driving down the road and, oh, there's a maple tree and there's an oak tree, and you can pick them off like just as you're driving along, but you've never noticed that. So I suggest, like, everybody that's listening, to, when you do go out in nature, to actually sit down and listen and look at everything around you, like birds and squirrels and insects. And there's so much going on that
Yes,
it's unbelievable.
and constantly
So
changing.
even though I was kind of like in nature before, but I never really took the time to actually pay attention to what's going on out there. So as I was growing older, and I I decided that that's what I was going to do, that was my career. And when you pick a career, you always think, some people it works out for them, and some it doesn't. But for me, I mean, I've been a ranger for 33 years, and I don't think I'd want to do, I've never thought of doing anything else but that, because it changes every day. It's not always the same thing. Um, we do have schedules. We work every day.
Awesome.
We
Perfect.
work, like, there's somebody that works every day. The office may not be open, but we work weekends and we're always on call 24 hours a day for situations, whether it's a fire, whether it's an injured animal or something like that. We're always on call. And we may have something scheduled for the day, but as soon as we come in, or at 7 o'clock in the morning, we get a call to do something else.
It's kind of like
So
teaching.
it's all
Yes,
about priorities. We
yes.
all we have to manage the priorities. So yeah.
We have another question here from Mr. Hickey. Mr. Hickey, if you want to turn your camera on and maybe your student wants to ask the question.
Yeah, this is Hamza. He has a question.
What is the most common animal?
The
in
most
Canada?
common animal,
Good question.
I
Thank
would
you.
say it's deer, the white-tailed deer. More than moose and more than bear. Yeah,
Sorry.
good question.
Great question. Anybody else have a question for Marc? I know some of the high school students have to leave right about now. I see the time is 11:08. Any other questions out there that the kids are fighting to
Oh.
ask? Oh, I see Miss Hallahan. Miss Hallahan, do you have a question from a student?
I do. This is Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
Is there any chance black bears will become extinct?
Oh, we can hear you, Hannah. Can you go a little bit closer?
A little bit closer.
Is there any chance black bears will become extinct?
Ooh, good question.
I would say not in New Brunswick. They're really, really good scavenger. They they will live, like, for example, I was talking about trees and how the length of how they live. For a deer, it could live up to about 7 years. I've seen deer as old as 12, but they as they get older, their teeth wear down to the gums, and then it's hard for them to chew. A moose will live for about 7 years or so. I've seen them like 12, 15. Bears live 20, 25 years. So, but they're really, really good at adapting in their habitat. So whether it's close to a house or in the forest, they tend to do well. They eat blueberries and all kinds of fruits and nuts and things. So
Awesome. Good question.
good question.
We have another.
Yes.
Oh,
How big does salmon usually get?
I've seen salmon as big as like 35 pounds, big, big fish. Yeah.
excellent. So I do see Mr. Hickey's hand up, but I'm not sure if that's from before. Is there another question there, Mr.
No,
Hickey?
we do have another here. I have another
Oh,
student to
perfect.
ask.
Yes. Students love to be on camera. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
What's the most endangered species in New Brunswick?
Good question.
I didn't have time to talk about that. The maritime ringlet butterfly.
Butterfly.
Interesting.
And the only
Wow.
place that it lives is in that salt marsh in the Bathurst area. It's called a maritime ringlet butterfly. And the reason why it's so endangered is because it only lives in the butterfly stage for 7 days. So it's got to do all its business in 7 days, which
Wow.
doesn't leave a whole lot of time. So
No.
if there's no habitat for them, they don't tend to do well. So that would be what I would consider probably the worst case scenario is the maritime ringlet butterfly. For a plant, it would be the Frobisher's louseworth, which the only place that you could see them would be around Mactaquac. And what happened there is when Mactaquac was built, they flooded the valley, the St. John River Valley, and that's where the plant was. So there are a few spots that have that plant, but it's pretty rare. So,
Awesome.
We have to be careful as humans of what we do, how we impact the ecosystems to make sure that these animals and plants and trees survive and do well and prosper.
That's right.
Very good question.
Great question.
I didn't get a chance to show you the picture of the maritime ringlet butterfly, but
Could you show it really quickly and then we're gonna have to end the class, but if you could show, I don't know if you can find it really quickly, maybe we'll give you a minute.
yeah, just let's see if I can find it real quick. Can you
'Cause
see it? Can you see my screen?
love butterflies.
Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay.
Just while we're waiting on that, in the chat, teachers, I did put the website to the speaking series. That's where the recording is going to be landing later this afternoon. So certainly if you want to use this material for future classes, I want to say thank you so much to Fredericton High School. I know they had to leave to go to their next class, but certainly they were the host family. And look, there's the maritime ringlet butterfly.
Yeah. So it's very rare, and the only place that you can see it in the world is in the Bathurst area in those salt marshes that I showed you a picture of. Yeah.
So awesome, Mark. I learned so much. I know the students did too. I actually think I'm going to have to go back and watch the recording because there was just so much in your presentation. But lovely to meet you. Lovely to have you present to the students in the province. For everyone that's in attendance, thank you so much for attending. Certainly feel free to reach out to myself or just reach out to the Center of Excellence if you wanted to have Mark come and do another session with your students. Maybe someday, maybe he could come in person. We don't know. I always ask, and you never know what's going to happen, what maps out. But I know Mark loves to tell about his career, and you can tell he's very passionate and excited about the work that he does, which I would be too. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. So from the Center of Excellence for Health, I hope you folks have a lovely day. Try and get outside and enjoy the beautiful natural setting that we have here in the province. Have a good day.
3.
Thank you.